In this class, we're going to look at the market. This is an extremely important topic, and we'll be making several classes available on the topic, just perhaps slightly different from each other, little emphasis in one area, little emphasis in a different area, and so on. But it is such an important topic, it does deserve many classes. So this is where we look at the interaction of demand and supply and the determination of the market price. So we'll start with what is the market? Well, it's a set of arrangements by which sellers and buyers agree to exchange goods or services. And it's not limited geographically, particularly nowadays with the advent of the internet and with global trading and global trading communications systems. But the market is not limited geographically. It's also not even limited over time. Contracts can be done in one time period for delivery in a different time period. But what we need to figure out is, what is it that determines the market, what determines the price in the market, and what determines the amount of the good that will be supplied in the market. So we need to look at the market in total. What is it exactly, and how does it work? There are two parts to the market. There is the demand side and the supply side. Alfred Marshall, back in 1890, in his book, taught us supply and demand is the nature of the market. And it's important that the interplay between supply and demand is understood if we're going to understand what the market price is going to be and what the output on the market is. So the market is made up from two parts, demand and supply. Demand is the quantity of a good buyers wish to purchase at each possible price. Now, we call it a flow concept because it's over time. My demand for something is per unit of time. My demand for bread is so much per day. My demand for rice is so much per week or per day. My demand for petrol is so much per month or per day or whatever. It's always got a time dimension. So when it has a time dimension, we say it's a flow concept. And this is contrasted with what we also call a stock concept. A stock concept, there is no time dimension. But for demand, we talk about my demand for coffee is 2 cups of coffee a day, per day. It's a flow concept. So demand is a flow concept. That's important to remember. And we'll just emphasize it. Stocks in economics are not related to time. We talk about the stock of capital in the UK at a moment in time. We talk about investment in the UK. Now that's a flow concept. That's happening over time. But our stock of capital is what we've got right now. And a country may talk about its stock of ships. That's what it's got at that moment in time. If it adds to its stock of ships, that's investment. It's added to it. If some of the ships are decommissioned because they are old, that's a flow as well. They're taking it out. So the stock is being diminished. So we have two concepts. The second one is flows, as I've been talking about. Flows are related to time. So I talk about my demand for petrol is so many litres per week. To say that my demand for petrol is 20 litres tells us nothing. Is it 20 litres a week or a month or a day or a year? We have to specify a time period. If I said my demand for bread is 1 loaf, now, it's a very ambiguous term because I'm not even sure what the size of a loaf is. If I said 1 loaf, it tells you nothing. Is it 1 loaf a year, 1 loaf a day, 1 loaf an hour? It's unlikely to be, but I haven't specified a time period. I must tell you the time period. If I do, it's a flow concept. If time is not an issue, it's a stock concept. We must be clear about these distinctions. Now, supply is a flow concept. It's the quantity of the good that comes onto the market at each possible price in a given time period. It's a flow concept. So the supply of carrots onto the market is so many tons of carrots per week or per day. It's the quantity that comes on the market. That's what we mean by supply. Supply is a flow concept. It's related to time. We also have to clear up what's meant by an equilibrium price. An equilibrium price is the price that is balances the market. The equilibrium balances the amount that the customers want and the amount that's supplied. On the other side of the equation, we've got demand. Demand is the quantity of good that we want in a given time period. If I said my demand for petrol was 20 litres, it tells you nothing. Is it 20 litres a day, 20 litres a year? We must specify a time period with demand, so it's a flow concept. And the quantity demanded depends on many factors. Depends on the price of the good, depends on the price of related goods, depends on my income, how much I can afford, depends on my preferences. I might be influenced by advertising, for example. It depends on health warnings. I might demand something or want something that is injurious to my health. And there are other factors. So we've got a whole list of determinants of demand. It's not just the price of the good that determines the demand. It's all these other factors as well. And the same for supply, by the way. The amount of supply in the market will be determined by its price, but it'll also be determined by the technology that's available, the amount of raw materials, the profitability of the business, and it's determined by many factors. So it's all getting very complex. We've got these two sides to the market, supply and demand, but as we can see, we've got many determinants of each. We get around this by this little wheeze that economists have got called ceteris paribus. We say that the quantity demanded depends on the price, other things being constant, everything else being constant. So we ignore everything else. We say, look, here is the demand for this good in a given time period against the price. But what about income, advertising, and all the other factors that we were talking about? Well, we just hold them constant. In a sense, we just ignore them. Just concentrate on price. We know that the other ones are important, but just leave them out for the moment. Let's focus in on price. What do we think the relationship between the price and the demand is? And we probably think it's something like what we've got on the screen right now. That it's downward sloping, I should say. As the price rises, less will be demanded. It's more expensive. It may not have this shape. It might be very steep, or it might be very shallow. But the idea is the same. As the price rises, the chances are we demand less of the good. The quantity depends on price, ceteris paribus. That's what we say. The output, the quantity demanded, depends on the price, ceteris paribus. Holding income and tastes and advertising and government announcements about the product and promotions, holding everything constant. The price determines the demand. So in a way it's like we're cheating, but we're not. We're going to relax this later. And what we're trying to do is isolate out the effect of each one on the demand. What's the likely effect of an increase in the price on the demand for a good? Well, the likely effect is if it goes up in price, we're going to purchase less of it. The chances are. And that's what we've got on the diagram here. That's exactly what we've got here. The price rises, we're going to demand less. The price falls, we'll demand more. So this almost little trick, ceteris paribus, enables us to isolate out each one we're thinking about. Income, the price of alternative goods, anything you can think of. We can isolate out that one, providing we say ceteris paribus, we're telling the listener that we're holding everything else constant, and we'll just focus in on this one. We're not cheating, we're just trying to work out what's the relationship between price and quantity. The other things, as I said here, are the price of related goods, consumer incomes, consumer preferences, perhaps advertising, marketing, goes on and on. We can have lots of determinants, but we're just interested in the price at the moment. So we'll say ceteris paribus. The quantity demanded depends on the price, ceteris paribus, holding everything else constant. Now, a change in the price will cause a movement along the curve. What's meant by that? Well, if we move the price from here downwards, we decrease the price, we can see here's price on the axis, so we're moving along the curve. We've reduced the price, we move from here, this point, down to here. So we moved along the curve. Because we've changed the price, we've moved along the curve. A change in the other things affect the position of the demand curve. If I said income changes, well, I haven't got income on the axis here. I've got price and quantity. So if income changes, it's going to shift the curve, shift it outwards or inwards. If I said advertising becomes more effective, oh, that's going to cause a shift of the curve. The relationship between price and quantity is this relationship. So if I wanted to find out the relationship between the quantity and consumer income, I put income up here and trying to work out what's the relationship between those two. A change in the other things, income, advertising, marketing in general, whatever is relevant for this particular product. If one of these changes, it can cause a shift of the curve. But the shift will be parallel to the original one because the price-quantity relationship still holds true. We say that as the price falls, we're going to demand more. But the curve may shift because incomes have changed. So if we're at this price here, I haven't marked it in at the moment, if we're at this price, we'd have this quantity demanded. Now, if income rises, well, we can afford more. So at the same price, we get more. So that's because income has increased. It could be at this price, advertising has been increased and now the consumers are more interested in the product, so they want to have more of it because of an increase in effective advertising. A change in income may cause the demand curve to shift to the right at the given price. Now, that's all I've been saying. So it can shift to the right because advertising has been more effective or income has increased or one of many factors. The fact is that will cause a shift of the curve. Now let's look at complements and substitutes. Now I'm going to put quite a lot of script on the screen. What I ask you to do is freeze the video when it comes on. Don't panic. Just freeze the video and copy it out. That's all we need to do. So just some notes for you. I could put them into the description for the video, but I decided to just leave them in the video. So when they come on the screen, just freeze it and you will have some notes on what's meant by complements. So in this case, I'll just talk my way through it for the moment. Complements could be cars and petrol. Well, I know cars are becoming more and more electric, so maybe that relationship is doomed. But at the moment, 2024, there is a relationship between cars and petrol. When the price of cars increases, less cars will be sold, hence less petrol will be demanded. When the price of a good increases, the quantity of a complementary good demanded will decrease. So complementary goods are ones that go together: cars and petrol, cars and electricity even. It's pointless having a car unless you can use it, I guess. So you have a car, we have petrol. If the price of petrol rises, you will use the car less often, you'll have less demand for the car because the price of petrol is so expensive. There is a relationship. The other type are substitutes. And again, I'd ask you to freeze the video and just copy this down, and you'll have some notes for it. Foreign and domestic holidays are a good example for substitutes. If people want to go on holiday, they can go domestically, or they can go to some foreign destination. When the price of foreign holidays increases, so it's more expensive to go abroad, people will go on domestic holidays. When the price of a good increases, the quantity of a substitute good demanded will also increase. You can see where we're getting that final statement. We're getting it from the previous one. And here we have an example: a foreign holiday and a domestic holiday. And that relationship when the price changes. And that's what's summarized in the final sentence. So that should be fairly straightforward. Any problems we can cover it again in class. So just bring it up again when we have a class. Now, types of good. Well, normal and inferior goods. A normal goods are goods. As incomes increases, I should say, we buy more of the good. So normal, as incomes increase, we buy more of the good. So we have more money, we buy more of the good. It's a normal good. An inferior good, as income increases, we buy less of the good. It's an inferior good. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the good. It doesn't mean that the quality of the good is bad. It could be perfectly good, a good good. But it's inferior if it has this relationship. If income increases, we buy less of it. That's what we mean by an inferior good. Nothing to do with the quality, just it's an economic relationship. As incomes rise, we buy less. And that's what we call in economics an inferior good. We have different types of goods in economics. We have others, the Giffen good, which is one we will bump into as well. The supply curve is what we call ceteris paribus. It is the amount supplied at a given price, other things being constant. So there are many factors that determine the supply. The technology, for example, raw materials, the ambition of the producers to supply more. There are many factors that can be used to explain the supply of a good on the market. The price is one of them. As the price rises, there's more incentive to supply the item onto the market. So we do expect the supply curve against price to be upward sloping, positively sloped like we've got here. The other things include technology, input costs, government regulations, and so on. So any of those changes, they will cause a shift of the curve. If technology changes, it may move the curve out here somewhere. Again, it would be parallel to itself. So at a going price, more is produced because the technology is better. So we have that sort of relationship. And supply is also a flow concept. It happens over time. It's the quantity per unit of time. Very important. It's not a stock. It is something that happens over time. We talk about the supply of cars in the UK market per year. If we just talk about the supply of cars was 100,000, it tells us nothing. Was it 100,000 a day, a week, a year? So we must specify a time period with supply, the same as we do with demand. And ceteris paribus also is used here. Other things include technology, import costs, government regulations. If this was the supply at this price and technology improved, we could supply more at the same price. Technology has improved, production costs have fallen, more is supplied. So other things will determine the position of the curve. So we have shifts of the curve. That's the point. The same as we had shifts of the demand curve. Now the market equilibrium is at E0. That's where the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied, and we have an equilibrium price of P0. The quantity is Q0. That's the balance. That's where the market is balanced. We need to talk about how that comes about. How does it work? And I'm going to give a brief explanation for that here. Let's look at this. Let's say the demand curve shifts to D1. Let's say incomes increase. Suddenly everyone has more income. The government cuts taxes, so people have more disposable income. Demand moves to the right. The supply remains the same. So if the demand moves to the right, then we would have a new equilibrium here at E1. The equilibrium is moved from E0 to E1. So the price will rise to P1 and the quantity traded will go to Q1. In other words, if the demand curve had remained at D0 here and the quantity demanded increased, then we would have an excess demand here. We need to have more demand because the demand has increased. We need to have more supply, I should say. More supply moving us to E1. So the demand curve shifts D0 to D1. The market moves to a new equilibrium at E1. That's because the demand has shifted outwards. Suppose safety regulations are tightened, increasing producers' costs. Well, if costs have increased, then the supply curve will move to the left. Now, the government's insisting upon better safety regulations, so the price is going to rise. We can see that the equilibrium moves from E0 to E2. And the quantity traded on the market will fall because now it's more expensive. More safety regulations means the price is increased to P1, so less is going to be traded. Supply curve shifts to S1. If the price stayed the same at P0, there will be excess demand. Well, the supply curve now is S1. If the price had stayed at P0, you can see this will be the demand here, and this is the supply over here. So excess supply. Excess demand. Sorry, beg your pardon. Excess demand. So demand is at Q0, and the new one will be at Q1, moving from one equilibrium, E0, to E2. So the market moves to a new equilibrium at E2. Two ways in which demand may increase. Well, we might get a movement along the curve if the price falls from P0 to P1. let's say the supply had increased. If the supply was through A at the moment and supply, because of technology improvements, let's say, moved to B. So now I haven't got the supply curve here, but just imagine it was going through B. We would have moved from A to B. That's caused by a shift in the supply curve. It could be caused by a shift of the demand from D0 to D1. So the demand increases. If the demand increases, then we would move at the going price of P0, we would have a new demand at C. If the consumers can't afford the extra quantity or the price is too much, it may fall to B, because that's what was compatible with their income in the past. So the point of all of this is that demand and supply curves can shift. They're not fixed. They can move and they will influence the market. So a movement of demand from D0 to D1, this leads to an increase in demand at each price. For example, at P0, the quantity demanded increases from Q0 to Q1. That's the increase in the quantity demanded at the going price, because the demand curve has shifted. Perhaps an advertising campaign has been very successful, causing the demand to shift outwards. Suppose there is a disastrous harvest and it moves the supply curve to SS. Now, this is pretty much a situation that confronts farmers, but it also confronts the food industry. Let's say the government tried to protect the poor by setting a price ceiling at P1. So the government is worried about the increase in the price of food going up to P0, very high price for food. It's worried about poor people not being able to afford it, so it fixes the price at P1 to try and help them. Well, P1 is below P0, the equilibrium price. So what we've got here is excess demand. At P1, there is more demand than supplied. The demand is B and the supply is A. That means we have a shortage. We have a shortage here. So we'd need rationing. We need some way of delivering this good to the poor people. We need to limit what they can buy. Another possibility, and it's not a good one, is some people would buy it at P1 and then sell it at a profit at P0. They bought it cheaply. The government insisted that was the price. So they kept it, and when the government relaxed the regulations, they sold it at P0. So they've made a profit. That was not the intention of the government. The intention of the government was to help them. So if there was rationing at P1, in other words, the government controlled the price at P1, we have excess demand. Demand is at B, supply is at A, excess demand. That means a shortage. The market decides how much of a good should be produced. We might think that it's not a very fair system, because the market decides it. The market, of course, is just people buying and selling. But sometimes the price is very high and we think it's unfair. But that is the market. That's how it works. We sometimes get a bit upset about it, but these are the forces of supply and demand. By finding the price at which the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied, that's how the market works. It's constantly moving towards that equilibrium, or at least we believe it is. We think it's moving towards it. It's not moving smoothly towards it. It might overcorrect sometimes, go too far, but it's always trying to find that equilibrium, and it's doing it automatically through the forces of supply and demand. It also tells us for whom the goods are produced. This is a bit more controversial. Who are the goods produced? Well, produced for the customers, but the customers are the ones who have an effective way of paying. They have the means for payment. If they don't have the means of payment, they don't get the goods. In that sense, the market is quite harsh. It doesn't give out the goods to people who need them. They have to be bought. They have to be paid for. Because the goods are economic. In other words, they have to be produced with scarce resources. And if they were given away, there's no incentive to produce them. So it tells us who gets the goods. It's the consumers who are willing to pay the price. It determines what goods are to be produced as well. These are the ones where the producers can make a profit. If they can't make a profit, they have no incentive to make the goods. There may be goods for which no consumer is prepared to pay a price at which the firms will be willing to supply. So it could be that the producers set the price so high nobody wants it. So then the producer loses. So the producer must set it the price where the producer can make a profit. Perhaps it's going to make very little profit, but it'll make a profit. It must be compensated for producing the good. So the market tells us how much to produce, for whom, and what should be produced. And that's all we're going to deal with in this session. So it's quite a long session. Go back over it a few times and break it up. Just stop it, have a rest, go back and make it again. But do make some notes from it. And we will encounter it again many more times in different formats in the classes to come. And let's leave it there and say thank you for watching.